The Galactic Council told us humans were primitive. They said we'd observe a harmless species just discovering FTL communication. Then I watched a woman in a nightclub take down 3 attackers with movements too fast for my enhanced implants to track. 10 minutes later, the floor was red. This wasn't the peaceful civilization we expected to catalog. Commander Vorth Prime called it a routine cataloging mission. He stood there with that confident tilt to his head, the holographic display of Earth rotating slowly behind him like a tranquil blue marble. His briefing painted humans as technological infants, barely out of their cradle. He described their first clumsy attempts at FTL communication as primitive signal bursts, something we were to observe and document with academic detachment. The cultural database backed him up completely. It categorized them as conflict-averse mammalians, a term we use for species that evolved strong social bonds to avoid internal strife. I spent hours reviewing the files, endless footage of agricultural communities, humans working fields with simple tools. Their governance structures appeared rudimentary, local councils making decisions about crop rotations and water rights. There were no standing armies in the data, no planetary defense networks. Just scattered settlements focused on survival and community. Gorth 7 actually laughed during the briefing. He leaned over and joked that we needed less security for this assignment than for a school field trip. His tactical assessment was based on their complete lack of orbital defenses and the non-militarized energy readings from their population centers. The data stream suggested we would be observing primitive communication rituals, perhaps their early attempts at interstellar greetings or basic trade negotiations. Santa, our protocol officer, prepared the most elementary diplomatic packages, simple trade discussions about mineral rights and agricultural exchange. She programmed the translators for basic vocabulary, focusing on words for peace, friendship, and mutual benefit. There was no need for conflict resolution subroutines or threat assessment protocols. Her preparations assumed a species that would be either fearful or curious, but never dangerous. Jax 2 ran the numbers from navigation. He calculated our entry vectors based on the assumption of a completely non-threatening civilization. He positioned our ship for optimal observational advantage, not tactical safety. His projections showed minimal risk, with abort scenarios that assumed only technical failures, not hostile engagement. Every parameter in his flight plan assumed passive observation of a harmless species. The resolution became clear only in retrospect. Every piece of pre-mission intelligence was dangerously incomplete, like trying to understand a supernova by studying a single spark. We had the agricultural reports, but not the military academies. We had the peaceful communities, but not the training facilities. We had the simple governance, but not the strategic command structures. The database showed us what humans wanted the galaxy to see, not what they actually were. So we descended toward Earth's atmosphere expecting to document harmless curiosity. Our sensors were calibrated for passive observation. Our weapon systems powered down to minimal levels. We approached as scholars approaching ancient ruins, not as scouts approaching a potential threat. The ship hummed with the quiet efficiency of a standard survey mission, completely unaware that every assumption guiding us was catastrophically wrong. Our atmospheric entry gave no warning of what awaited below. The ship slid through the thermosphere with the usual smooth efficiency, sensors calibrated for passive observation of a supposedly primitive civilization. Then we hit the urban perimeter. The scanning equipment immediately lit up with energy signatures our systems couldn't categorize. Not weapons, not industrial output, not communication arrays. Just raw, chaotic energy burst concentrated in specific structures across the city. Gorth 7 leaned forward at his station, his 4 hands moving across the controls with growing confusion. The decibel readings went first. Our safety thresholds are set for council chambers and research facilities. The audio sensors registered sustained noise levels that would require hearing protection on any civilized world. It wasn't industrial machinery or emergency alerts. It was organic. Thousands of human voices shouting over some kind of rhythmic vibration that shook our external microphones. Then the air samplers kicked in. The filtration systems detected fermented grain alcohol molecules saturating the atmosphere around these energy centers. Not trace elements, not industrial byproducts. The concentration suggested intentional atmospheric alteration on a massive scale. Our environmental systems flagged it as potential chemical warfare before the contextual analysis overrode the alert. The visual displays started showing static patterns. Not interference, but actual light emissions from the surface. Strobing patterns at frequencies that made my ocular implants struggle to maintain focus. Flashing lights in rhythmic sequences. Colors shifting violently from deep red to blinding white. The patterns created afterimages on our screens that lingered long after the scene had changed. I documented what appeared to be pure chaos. Humans moving in synchronized patterns that made no evolutionary sense. Rhythmic collective motion that served no apparent purpose beyond motion itself. Groups of dozens, sometimes hundreds, moving in perfect time to the overwhelming audio vibrations. Their movements were inefficient, energy-wasting, completely contrary to the agricultural efficiency we'd been shown in the briefing materials. Gorth 7 actually activated defensive protocols. His tactical training overrode his observational mandate. He brought our shield systems to standby and powered up the point defense arrays. The regulations clearly prohibited interference, but his instinct said we were observing some kind of mass psychological event or military training exercise. I searched the cultural database for references to this behavior. Pattern. Nothing. The files contained rituals for harvest celebrations, religious observances, even mating displays. Nothing about coordinated movement to overwhelming sensory assault in enclosed spaces, filled with alcohol-saturated air. The resolution came slowly, through cross-reference data streams. This wasn't a malfunction or military exercise. The humans called it a nightclub. Their social gatherings operated on entirely different principles than anything in our database. Where we sought quiet contemplation and orderly interaction, they sought sensory overload and collective energy expenditure. We shifted from orbital observation to close-range visual monitoring. The ship dropped to low altitude, hovering just above the urban canopy. I adjusted my sensors for maximum resolution, focusing on one particular structure that seemed to be the epicenter of this bizarre human behavior. The external cameras showed humans lining up outside, paying currency for the privilege of entering this environment of controlled chaos. My ocular implant overlays tracked 347 humans in various states of motion within the establishment. Each moved through the chaotic environment with the wasted energy typical of their species. They swayed, stumbled, gestured wildly, and moved without purpose or efficiency. Then my tracking system locked onto an anomaly near the perimeter. One female human exhibited movement patterns that didn't match her environment, while others surrendered to the rhythms and sensory overload. She maintained a different energy entirely. Her posture suggested constant environmental assessment rather than relaxation. Her head moved in smooth, efficient arcs that covered all approach vectors. Her shoulders remained level while those around her bobbed and weaved with the music. She moved with economical precision that stood in stark contrast to the energy waste around her. Where others took 3 steps to cross a space, she took 1. Where they gestured broadly to communicate, she used minimal hand signals. Her footwork avoided collisions without appearing to consciously adjust. The conservation of energy was remarkable, like watching a predator move through tall grass. I recorded micro-expressions that indicated heightened situational awareness. Tiny muscle movements around her eyes that tracked peripheral motion, minimal head tilts that calculated distances, slight shifts in weight distribution that maintained optimal balance. Her breathing remained steady while those around her panted from exertion. She was assessing threats while pretending to sip her drink. Gorth 7 noticed it too. His tactical training overrode his amusement at the human spectacle. He noted her positioning offered multiple escape routes and tactical advantages. She stood with her back to a structural support column, giving her a clear view of both primary exits and the main thoroughfare. Her position also placed her near service access points that didn't appear on the public layout schematics. Santa leaned over her console, her translator systems analyzing the human's behavior patterns. She commented that the woman moved like a Zeltarian diplomatic security operative. High-value protection details move exactly that way through crowded spaces. Constant threat assessment masked as casual movement. Economy of motion that preserves energy for sudden action. Positioning that appears accidental but is mathematically perfect for response scenarios. The resolution became unavoidable. This human represented something our databases didn't account for. The cultural files showed peaceful farmers and simple technicians. They didn't show individuals who moved through chaotic social environments with the precision of special operations personnel. Either our intelligence was wrong or humanity contained subsets we hadn't been warned about. We focused all recording equipment on the anomaly. Multispectrum imaging, micro-expression analysis, movement pattern tracking. Every sensor we had redirected to this single human. The rest of the chaotic scene faded into background noise. The screaming music, the flashing lights, the wasted motion of hundreds of humans all became irrelevant. We had found something the Galactic Council never predicted might exist. A human who moved like she expected violence at any moment. 3 males started moving through the crowd toward her position. They moved with the exaggerated confidence of intoxicated mammals, their postures broadcasting territorial intent clear even through the chaotic environment. Their approach pattern showed the classic triangular formation seen in pack predators across multiple species. The largest took point while the other 2 flanked slightly behind, creating a natural funnel toward their target. Our social interaction database immediately flagged multiple violations. Human norms emphasize personal space boundaries and consent-based interaction. These males were closing distance without invitation, their body language aggressive rather than social. The lead male's shoulders were raised and forward, his hands held away from his body in what the database classified as dominance display. The other 2 maintained visual scanning of the surrounding crowd, a behavior pattern associated with threat assessment against potential interference. The female's response was immediate but subtle. Her posture shifted from environmental assessment to combat readiness without visible tension. Her breathing pattern didn't change. Her facial muscles remained relaxed, but her weight distribution shifted to the balls of her feet, her center of gravity lowering almost imperceptibly. Her left hand drifted slightly toward her hip, while her right hand maintained hold of her drink. She turned her head just enough to track all 3 males without making direct eye contact. She delivered the verbal warning with calm precision that cut through the music. "Don't grab me." 4 syllables, neutral tone, no emotional charge. The delivery matched diplomatic warning protocols used by professional security details. No anger, no fear, just clear communication of boundaries. Our translators confirmed the phrasing was direct and unambiguous in all major human languages. The males responded with laughter that our emotion analyzers classified as threat escalation. The lead male's laughter showed dominance challenge patterns while the flanking males exhibited pack reinforcement behavior. Their movement continued unabated, the lead now reaching toward her arm in clear violation of the stated boundary. The situation had escalated from social misunderstanding to direct physical threat. I activated emergency medical protocols. The trauma response systems calculated probable injury patterns based on size disparities and likely impact forces. The projections showed high probability of fractures, soft tissue damage, and potential neurological trauma for the smaller female. Standard procedure dictated preparation for mass casualty events in confined spaces with intoxicated participants. Gorth 7 prepared to violate the Prime Directive. His hands moved across tactical controls, bringing non-lethal deterrent systems to ready status. He calculated stun frequencies that would disable the males without permanent damage. His threat assessment showed imminent physical harm to a civilian, which under Council regulations allowed for limited intervention to prevent serious injury. The female's response proved more measured and dangerous than anything we anticipated. She didn't retreat or escalate emotionally. She simply acted with the efficiency of someone who had trained for this exact scenario thousands of times. Her movements became economical and precise, turning the male's aggressive energy against them with minimal effort. We witnessed humanity's conflict resolution methodology in its purest form. Not the diplomatic negotiations from our databases, not the community mediation practices we'd been shown. This was something else entirely. A refined system of physical persuasion that operated on principles of maximum effect with minimum force. The laughter died as the first male hit the floor. The first male reached for her arm, his hand moving through the strobe-lit air with drunken certainty. His fingers aimed for her wrist in clear violation of the boundary she'd established. My ocular implants, calibrated to track projectiles and micro-expressions, registered movement but couldn't resolve the action. The data stream showed a blur where her arm should have been, then the male collapsing. Her hand moved faster than any organic limb I'd documented in 17 years of field observation. The motion wasn't just quick, it was economically perfect. No wasted energy, no extraneous movement. She struck 3 precise points on the first attacker's body in under a second. The impacts weren't powerful blows but targeted disruptions. A strike to the brachial plexus that numbed his arm, a thumb pressure to the radial nerve that dropped him to his knees, an elbow strike to the temple that ended his participation completely. The second attacker collapsed before registering that the first was disabled. His brain hadn't processed the visual information yet. He was still moving forward when her foot swept his legs and her palm struck his sternum. The combination dropped him like a disconnected puppet. His head hit the floor with a sound that cut through the music. He didn't move again. Jax 2 demanded immediate sensor recalibration from the engineering station. He thought our equipment was malfunctioning. The timing data showed impossible intervals between movements. The force calculations indicated minimal energy expenditure for maximum effect. He ran diagnostic after diagnostic, convinced our systems were corrupted by the atmospheric interference or the strobing lights. The numbers kept coming back verified. The third attacker attempted flight. His survival instincts finally overrode his aggression. He turned to push through the crowd, his body already angled toward the nearest exit. She intercepted him mid-turn, not with pursuit but with anticipation. She simply moved to where he would be and used his momentum against him, a hip throw that sent him over her shoulder into a nearby table. The crash of glass and metal barely registered in the ongoing music. 3 humans incapacitated in less time than our systems could analyze. The entire engagement lasted 2.3 seconds according to the timestamp data. Our computers needed 4.7 seconds just to process and catalog the movements. The tactical analysis software flagged multiple techniques that matched advanced combat training from 7 different warrior species. Yet this was a civilian female in a social environment. She adjusted her clothing with the same economical movements. A slight tug on her sleeve, a quick smoothing of her hair. No heavy breathing, no adrenaline tremors. She walked toward the bar as if she'd simply brushed aside some minor inconvenience. The bartender handed her a fresh drink without comment. The whole establishment had registered the violence but showed no particular alarm. Some patrons stepped around the fallen males without breaking their dance movements. The resolution left us with more questions than answers. Either our understanding of human physiology was completely wrong, or this represented specialized training we hadn't accounted for. The Galactic Council's files showed average human reaction times and strength capabilities. This demonstration exceeded those parameters by orders of magnitude. We weren't observing a primitive species. We were observing something that defied our basic understanding of organic capability. The quiet that followed proved more disturbing than the violence. For approximately 10 seconds, the only sounds were the continuing music and the groans of the incapacitated males. Then 8 more humans converged from different points in the establishment. They didn't rush or shout. They simply moved with purpose through the still dancing crowd. Their movement patterns suggested coordinated response rather than emotional reaction. They approached from multiple vectors, maintaining spacing that covered all angles. 2 took positions near exits, 3 moved to flanking positions, while the remaining 3 advanced directly. Their footsteps fell in rhythm despite the chaotic music. Their eye contact with each other was minimal but precise, communicating through gestures so subtle our systems barely registered them. The female positioned herself with her back against a structural support column. The location provided clear sight lines to all approaches while protecting her rear. She adjusted her stance slightly, feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced on the balls of her feet. Her hands hung loosely at her sides, fingers relaxed but ready. The posture registered as combat-ready in 17 different cultural databases, matching everything from Cathar peacekeepers to Zelian riot control specialists. Her voice cut through the renewed music with calm precision. I really hate having to repeat myself. The statement carried no anger, no fear, just factual information. Our translators confirmed the phrasing indicated prior warning had been given and ignored. The tone suggested professional annoyance rather than personal offense. The new group's spokesman took half a step forward before collapsing. He didn't make any threatening gestures. He simply opened his mouth to speak when her foot swept his legs and her palm struck his sternum. The movement was too fast to track, the result instantaneous. He hit the floor with a sound like a sack of grain dropping from a height. His companions froze mid-movement, their coordinated advance shattered by the sudden demonstration. Security personnel arrived at that moment but hesitated to intervene. 4 humans in distinctive uniforms moved to the perimeter of the scene. They carried communication devices and non-lethal restraint equipment. They assessed the situation, counted the downed humans, and made no move to approach the female. Their body language showed recognition rather than confusion. One security officer actually nodded to her before speaking into his communicator. The resolution unfolded with clinical efficiency. Over the next 7 minutes, the remaining 7 humans attempted various approaches. Some tried negotiation, some tried intimidation, some tried coordinated rushes. None succeeded. The female disabled each with minimal movements, targeting joints and pressure points with surgical precision. She moved like a technician performing well-practiced procedures rather than a combatant fighting for survival. 10 minutes after the first warning, the floor was very, very red indeed. The lighting made the blood appear almost black in the strobe effects, pooling around unconscious forms and expanding patterns. The music continued playing, the other humans continued dancing, and the security team maintained their perimeter. The establishment operated around the violence like water flowing around a rock in a stream. She ordered a whiskey while waiting for authorities. The bartender placed a clean glass on the counter and poured amber liquid from a bottle without a label. She drank it straight, her hand steady, her breathing even. She placed payment on the counter and turned to watch the entrance where official vehicles were now arriving. Her expression remained neutral, assessing the new arrivals with the same professional detachment she'd shown the attackers. We remained in observation mode long after the incident concluded. The music eventually stopped. The strobing lights gave way to harsh overhead illumination, and the remaining patrons dispersed with minimal conversation. The scene transformed from chaotic entertainment venue to clinical assessment zone in under 3 minutes. The transition felt rehearsed, like changing sets between acts in a theatrical production. Medical teams arrived with efficient professionalism. They moved through the establishment with practiced precision, assessing injuries and prioritizing treatment. Their equipment was standardized and well-maintained. Their movements coordinated without unnecessary communication. They treated the wounded with detached competence, focusing on stabilization rather than diagnosis. The blood on the floor became just another variable in their triage calculations. The female explained the events to authorities with calm precision. She stood near the bar, her posture relaxed but attentive. She described each engagement in technical terms, using language that matched professional after-action reports rather than emotional recollections. She identified each attacker by their position and sequence of approach. Her account included timing estimates that later proved accurate to within half a second of our sensor recordings. She demonstrated movements on compliant medical staff to illustrate techniques. A young medic volunteered to stand as her training partner. She showed the precise angle for the brachial plexus strike, the exact pressure point for radial nerve disruption, the optimal positioning for the hip throw. The medic absorbed the demonstrations with professional interest, asking clarifying questions about weight distribution and targeting. The authorities watched with the attentive silence of students in a technical lecture. The authorities accepted her explanation of self-defense without question. They took notes on standardized forms, recording her statements with minimal follow-up inquiries. Their body language showed familiarity with this type of incident. They collected witness statements from security personnel and bartenders, all of which corroborated her account. The process felt routine, like processing a traffic violation rather than a mass casualty event. I reviewed sensor data showing 11 humans incapacitated with surgical precision. Each injury represented maximum effect with minimum force. Strikes targeted neurological shutdown points rather than structural damage. Joint manipulations used leverage rather than strength. The force calculations showed expert understanding of human anatomy and biomechanics. This wasn't brawling, this was applied science. Gorth 7 calculated she used minimal force necessary for each threat level. His tactical analysis showed escalating response matched to escalating threat. The first attacker received disabling strikes. The second received slightly more forceful takedowns. The coordinated group faced more decisive interventions. Her response curve followed professional security protocols for multiple aggressor scenarios. The calculations showed restraint, not excess. Santa noted her language patterns indicated legal familiarity with violence. She used specific terminology from human self-defense statutes. She referenced case law precedents during her explanation. Her phrasing matched legal justification frameworks rather than personal narrative. She spoke like someone who had testified before judicial proceedings multiple times. Her comfort with the process suggested institutional rather than personal experience. The resolution became unavoidable. This wasn't exceptional behavior. It was trained and normalized. The medical teams knew how to handle these injuries. The authorities knew how to process these reports. The security personnel knew when to intervene and when to observe. The entire society appeared structured around managing violence as a routine occurrence, rather than an extraordinary event. We began questioning everything in our cultural database. The agricultural communities might be real, but they weren't the whole story. The simple governance structures might exist, but they clearly operated alongside other systems. The conflict-averse description wasn't false so much as incomplete. Humanity clearly maintained parallel social structures, one for peaceful interaction, one for violent resolution, and they switched between them with terrifying efficiency. The next morning, we implemented emergency research protocols. Commander Vorth Prime insisted we continue with original mission parameters. He stood by the initial briefing data, dismissing our observations as isolated anomalies. His orders remained unchanged: document peaceful human development, prepare for technological uplift, maintain non-interference protocols. The nightclub incident was to be filed as cultural curiosity, not strategic reassessment. The crew unanimously agreed to expand investigation beyond protocol. Gorth 7 bypassed 3 separate regulatory restrictions to access enhanced surveillance equipment. Santa recalibrated her translation matrices for combat terminology, rather than diplomatic phrases. Jax 2 reprogrammed our sensors to detect biomechanical stress patterns instead of technological signatures. We operated with the quiet determination of investigators who know the official story is wrong. We visited human physical training facilities called gyms. The first one we observed occupied an entire city block. Glass walls revealed hundreds of humans moving in synchronized patterns. The air carried the scent of sweat and cleaning chemicals. The noise was a constant mix of clanging metal, grunting effort, and rhythmic counting. Humans of all ages moved through structured routines with focused intensity. I documented humans voluntarily subjecting themselves to physical stress. They lifted metal weights until their muscles trembled and veins bulged. They ran on moving platforms until their breathing became ragged and their skin glistened with moisture. They stretched their joints beyond normal range of motion, faces showing discomfort they actively embraced. The voluntary nature of the suffering was the most perplexing aspect. They lifted heavy weights and endured pain with apparent satisfaction. A young human female repeatedly raised a barbell loaded with plates that should exceed her structural capacity. Her face contorted with strain, her arms shook with fatigue, yet she completed the movement and immediately added more weight. Another human male performed leg exercises that visibly stressed his knee joints, his expression showing determination rather than distress. The correlation between pain and achievement was unmistakable. Gorth 7 identified combat training patterns in seemingly casual exercises. He pointed out how a simple pushing motion mirrored close-quarters combat techniques. A pulling exercise duplicated the motion for disarming opponents. Even the running machines trained for rapid pursuit and evasion scenarios. The weight training built strength specifically useful for grappling and striking. Every movement served multiple purposes beyond physical fitness. Jax 2 noted the facilities were more numerous than eating establishments. His demographic mapping showed 3 gyms for every restaurant in the urban center. The distribution patterns indicated easy access from all residential zones. Membership costs were surprisingly low, making them accessible to most of the population. The facilities operated from early morning until late night, accommodating all work schedules. Physical prowess development appeared central to human culture. The investment in facilities, time, and resources suggested systematic prioritization of physical capability. This wasn't recreational activity, it was cultural imperative. The consistency of training approaches across demographic groups indicated standardized methodologies. The lack of medical oversight for what constituted dangerous activities revealed astonishing risk tolerance. We prepared to investigate specialized training facilities. Gorth 7 identified locations labeled as martial arts academies and combat sports gyms. Santa compiled lists of military training centers and police academies. Jax 2 mapped government-funded fitness programs in educational institutions. The gyms were just the visible tip of a much larger infrastructure. The real training happened in places designed specifically for violence. The martial arts training facility revealed the most disturbing findings. We entered a space labeled as a dojo, expecting perhaps cultural dance or meditation practices. The reality was something else entirely. The air smelled of sweat and polished wood. The walls were lined with mirrors that reflected rows of human children in identical white uniforms. Their ages ranged from approximately 6 to 16 Earth years, all moving in synchronized patterns under the watchful eye of an adult instructor. We observed human children as young as 6 years old, performing coordinated movements. Their small bodies moved through complex sequences with surprising precision. The instructor called out commands in a language our translators identified as Japanese, though the techniques appeared to draw from multiple human combat traditions. The children responded instantly to each command, their faces showing concentration rather than playfulness. This wasn't recreational activity, it was systematic training. They were being taught precise techniques to incapacitate opponents. The instructor demonstrated joint manipulation on compliant students. He took a child's arm and showed exactly how to twist it to cause maximum pain with minimal effort. The children then practiced on each other, applying the techniques with careful control. The instructor corrected their hand positions and angles, emphasizing efficiency over force. The lessons focused on neutralizing larger opponents through leverage and precision. Children practiced strikes on padded targets with alarming force. Their small fists and feet struck practice dummies with audible impacts. The targets rocked backward from the force of their blows. The instructor measured their power using electronic sensors that displayed numbers on a wall screen. The children competed to achieve higher scores, their strikes becoming more focused and powerful with each attempt. They learned to channel their body weight into strikes that should have been beyond their physical capacity. I recorded a lesson on pressure points that could disable adult humans. The instructor used diagrams showing human nervous system pathways. He demonstrated precise finger placements on volunteer students. The children practiced finding these points on each other's necks, wrists, and torsos. The instructor explained which points caused temporary paralysis, which created disabling pain, and which could cause unconsciousness. The children absorbed this knowledge with the same focus they might show in mathematics class. Gorth 7 identified 17 separate lethal techniques taught as fundamentals. His tactical analysis software flagged moves that matched advanced combat training from specialized military units across the galaxy. Wrist locks that could permanently disable hands, throat strikes that could collapse airways, temple strikes that could cause immediate unconsciousness. These weren't advanced techniques reserved for elite practitioners. They were part of the basic curriculum for children. Santa noted the children showed no distress learning violent methods. Their expressions remained focused and calm throughout the training. They showed no apprehension about practicing dangerous techniques on each other. The instructor treated the teaching of violence as routine education, like reading or arithmetic. The parents observing from the sidelines showed pride rather than concern. The normalization of combat training was perhaps the most disturbing aspect. Combat training wasn't optional, it was embedded in education. The dojo operated as an extracurricular activity, but attendance appeared nearly universal among the local children. The training complemented their regular schooling, with many arriving directly from academic classes. The facility maintained records of progress and advancement through colored belt systems. Achievement in martial arts carried the same social weight as academic success. We realized human violence was systematic from earliest childhood. This wasn't random aggression or cultural anomaly. It was structured, methodical training that began when humans were most impressionable. The children learned violence as a language, as a science, as a fundamental skill. They absorbed it alongside reading and mathematics, making it part of their basic worldview. The Galactic Council's files showed peaceful agricultural societies. But we were seeing the machinery that made those societies possible. Systematic training in controlled violence from the earliest age. Sergeant Maria Santos provided terrifying context about her upbringing. We approached her after observing her training session at the military facility. She stood near the obstacle course, wiping sweat from her forehead with a practiced motion. Her uniform showed the wear of regular training. The fabric faded at pressure points and seams. She regarded us with the calm assessment we'd come to recognize in trained humans. She described beginning formal combat training at age 6. Her first lessons involved basic strikes and grappling techniques. The instruction occurred 3 times weekly after her academic classes. She recalled learning joint locks before she could properly write in cursive. The training intensified during summer breaks with full-day sessions that included weapons familiarization. Her childhood friends followed similar schedules at different facilities across the city. She explained it was normal for human children to learn self-defense. Most children in her neighborhood began training between ages 5 and 7. The programs were often bundled with academic curricula as extracurricular activities. Schools offered credit for martial arts advancement. Community centers provided subsidized training for low-income families. The availability and affordability made combat training nearly universal in her demographic. Her family considered it essential education like reading or mathematics. Her parents enrolled her before kindergarten. They viewed it as fundamental as learning alphabet or numbers. Family gatherings included demonstrations of new techniques. Relatives gave training equipment as birthday gifts. Vacation plans sometimes included visits to famous training centers. The cultural expectation was clear. Unpreparedness was negligence. She showed us photographs of childhood tournaments and competitions. The images showed children as young as 8 competing in full-contact sparring. Arenas filled with spectators watching elimination matches. Medal ceremonies for winners in multiple age categories. Team competitions where schools represented their districts. The events were structured like academic competitions but with physical combat as the measured skill. Gorth 7 calculated her skill level could disable most galactic species. His analysis accounted for her 20 years of continuous training. The techniques she demonstrated showed efficiency against larger opponents. Her movement patterns indicated mastery of multiple combat systems. The speed and precision measurements exceeded special operations standards for 14 council species. Her casual demonstration of pressure point strikes would neutralize 90% of known bipedal life forms. Santa noted she discussed violence with casual familiarity. Santos described breaking techniques with the same tone one might use discussing cooking methods. She explained nerve strikes while adjusting her equipment belt. Her language normalized concepts that would be emergency protocols for other species. She used combat terminology as everyday vocabulary, without recognizing its exceptional nature. The psychological normalization was more concerning than the physical training. Human society normalized lethal capability from childhood. The systematic training created populations with inherent defensive capacity. Every adult carried fundamental combat skills regardless of profession. The cultural value placed on physical readiness shaped social structures and interactions. What other species viewed as extraordinary violence, humans viewed as basic education. We began understanding the scale of human martial preparation. The training infrastructure extended through educational systems, community programs, and private facilities. Generations of humans received standardized combat instruction from early childhood through adulthood. The investment in training represented significant cultural priority. Their technological simplicity concealed this systematic development of personal capability. The galactic community had completely misjudged where human advancement had truly focused. Human authorities invited us to observe urban combat drills. They presented it as routine training for emergency responders. The facility was a sprawling complex of concrete structures designed to mimic human urban environments. Multi-story buildings with fake windows, simulated streets with abandoned vehicles, even underground tunnel systems. The scale suggested regular use by large numbers of personnel. The exercise involved simulated city environments with live weapons. The participants used projectile firearms modified to fire-marking rounds. The ammunition left visible paint marks on impact, but could cause real injury at close range. Explosive charges created controlled detonations that shook the ground. Smoke generators filled corridors with obscuring clouds. The environment matched combat zones we'd documented on war-torn worlds. 12 recruits engaged in building clearance against equally equipped opponents. They moved through the mock city in 2 teams of 6. Both sides wore protective gear and communication systems. The exercise began with one team defending a structure, while the other attempted to secure it. The rules allowed full contact engagement with minimal safety restrictions. We witnessed calculated violence with high casualty rates. Within the first minute, 3 participants were marked as casualties. They fell to precise shots from concealed positions. Their teammates dragged them to cover and continued the mission. When half a team was eliminated by a simulated explosive, the survivors regrouped without hesitation. They redistributed ammunition and modified tactics instantly. The team leader accepted losses as necessary for mission success. He directed remaining personnel without checking on the wounded. His commands focused on objective completion rather than casualty minimization. He sacrificed 2 team members to draw out enemy positions. His decision-making prioritized tactical advantage over individual survival. The cold efficiency matched special operations protocols from advanced military species. Gorth 7 identified tactics refined through actual combat experience. The building clearance techniques showed evidence of field testing. The room entry procedures had been optimized through repetition. The communication patterns used battle-tested brevity codes. The weapons handling demonstrated muscle memory from real engagements. These weren't theoretical exercises. They were rehearsals of proven methods. Jax 2 noted the weapons were merely enhanced versions of primitive designs. The firearms operated on chemical propulsion principles centuries old. The explosives used conventional compounds rather than energy-based charges. The protective gear consisted of layered ceramics and metals. The technology was straightforward but implemented with brutal efficiency. Their effectiveness came from skill rather than innovation. Humans maintained war readiness despite technological limitations. The training intensity exceeded that of most galactic defense forces. The casualty acceptance indicated profound cultural prioritization of combat effectiveness. The frequency of exercises suggested constant preparation for actual conflict. Their technological simplicity concealed this relentless martial preparation. We requested meeting with exercise leadership. The invitation to observe had been carefully controlled, showing only what they wanted seen. We needed to understand the broader context. The scale of facilities suggested planetary-level preparedness. The training methodologies indicated institutional knowledge passed through generations. The human approach to violence was clearly systematic rather than emergent. The team leader approached us after the exercise, his uniform marked with simulated blood and paint. He removed his helmet, revealing a face that showed neither fatigue nor excitement. His eyes assessed us with the same analytical detachment he'd shown during the drill. He waited for our questions without offering introductions or pleasantries. The silence felt like part of the assessment. Captain Jake Morrison provided numbers that changed everything. He stood before the tactical display in the observation bunker, his uniform crisp despite the hour, his eyes holding the calm assessment we'd come to recognize in human military personnel. He explained the exercise we'd witnessed was standard for all military personnel, part of routine training cycles that occurred monthly across all human defense forces. The complexity and intensity weren't exceptional. They represented baseline readiness protocols. He delivered the statistic with casual precision. Active military represented only 1% of human population. The number seemed reassuring until he continued. That tiny percentage masked the true scale of human military capacity. Behind that professional force stood hundreds of millions who participated in combat sports and martial arts. The distinction between civilian and soldier blurred beyond recognition. He described 2 global conflicts in the last century alone. His tone remained matter-of-fact, discussing planetary-scale warfare with the detachment of someone reading weather reports. The conflicts involved mobilization numbers that dwarfed most galactic civilizations' total populations. The casualty figures exceeded entire species birth rates for decades. He presented this as recent history, not ancient legend. Humanity's history showed constant warfare since prehistoric times. Morrison's timeline stretched back through recorded history to before written language. Conflict over resources, territory, ideology. The reasons changed, but the violence remained constant. Their technological advancement occurred parallel to military development, each war driving innovation that fueled the next conflict. Peace intervals served as preparation phases rather than permanent states. Gorth 7 calculated potential mobilization in billions within months. His console displayed population distribution maps cross-referenced with training databases. The numbers shocked even our seasoned tactical officer. Reserve forces, veterans, martial arts practitioners, combat sports participants. The pool of trained individuals reached staggering proportions. The infrastructure for rapid armament existed in their industrial base. Their society was pre-engineered for total war conversion. Santa noted their philosophy: peace through preparedness for war. She analyzed the cultural underpinnings behind the statistics. Human societies maintained constant readiness not because they sought conflict, but because they believed preparation prevented it. Their historical experience taught that weakness invited aggression. Their entire civilization operated on the principle that strength was the ultimate deterrent. This explained their paradoxical combination of apparent peace and constant martial training. 8 billion humans represented latent military capacity. The number took on new meaning when viewed through Morrison's statistics. Even a 10% mobilization would create the largest military force in known space. Their technological simplicity became strategic advantage. Their weapons required minimal training. Their tactics emphasized adaptability over technology. Their industrial base could rapidly convert to war production. We understood why they maintained combat readiness despite apparent peace. The surface tranquility concealed deep structural preparation. Their cities were designed for defense, their transportation networks for mobilization, their education systems for combat training. What we initially perceived as technological backwardness was actually optimized simplicity for rapid scaling. Their society wasn't peaceful, it was pre-conflict. Morrison's historical overview revealed a species shaped by violence. He described humanity's development through constant warfare, tracing their evolution from primitive conflicts to global engagements. His timeline showed uninterrupted cycles of conflict across their entire recorded history. Each period of peace served as preparation for the next confrontation, rather than permanent resolution. The pattern repeated across continents and cultures with remarkable consistency. Technological advancement consistently served military applications. Every major breakthrough in their development was immediately adapted for combat. Communication systems became command networks. Transportation innovations became logistics networks. Energy developments became power sources for weapon systems. Even their medical advances focused on battlefield trauma and rapid recovery from injuries. The pattern showed clear prioritization of martial utility over other applications. Their art, literature, and philosophy reflected conflict perspectives. I reviewed their cultural artifacts with new understanding. Epic poems celebrated military heroes. Paintings depicted historical battles. Philosophical texts explored the ethics of warfare and justifications for violence. Their entertainment media featured conflict as central themes. Even children's stories contained moral lessons about preparation and defense against threats. Even their diplomacy operated from positions of strength and deterrence. Their negotiation tactics assumed underlying capability for violence. Treaty agreements included military readiness clauses. International relations centered on alliance structures rather than universal cooperation. Their concept of peace required demonstrated capacity for war. This wasn't negotiation. It was managed conflict through other means. Gorth 7 identified patterns seen only in apex predator species. His comparative analysis showed behavioral matches with the most dangerous carnivores in known space. The constant readiness state, the systematic training of young, the social structures optimized for coordinated violence. These were evolutionary adaptations typically found in species that dominated their ecosystems through physical dominance rather than cooperation. Santa noted their social structures, optimized for rapid mobilization. Their cities were designed with wide transportation corridors for military movement. Their communication networks could be instantly repurposed for command control. Their industrial base maintained capacity for rapid conversion to war production. Their education systems produced citizens with fundamental combat training. Every aspect of their society supported conflict readiness. JAX 2 calculated their FTL communication primarily served command coordination. The technology we were about to give them would revolutionize their military capacity. Instant communication across planetary distances would allow coordinated operations on global scale. Their existing command structures could expand to interstellar operations without fundamental reorganization. The timing advantages would be overwhelming against any conventional force. Humanity wasn't primitive, they were differently advanced. Their technological development had followed a different evolutionary path. Where other species developed energy weapons and force fields, they perfected personal combat and tactical coordination. Where others built defensive satellites, they trained entire populations in urban warfare. Their advancement focused on organic capability rather than external technology. Their backward technology masked sophisticated martial development. The simple firearms were optimized for mass production and ease of use. The unarmored vehicles prioritized speed and mobility over protection. The communication devices emphasized reliability over complexity. Every technological choice reflected combat efficiency, rather than comfort or convenience. What appeared to be technological deficiency was actually strategic optimization for conflict scenarios we hadn't anticipated. The realization settled with chilling clarity. We weren't observing a species that needed technological uplift. We were observing a species that had mastered violence on a scale the galaxy hadn't seen. Their apparent simplicity was the most sophisticated camouflage imaginable. They had hidden their true nature behind the appearance of backwardness while perfecting the art of conflict resolution through overwhelming force. We compiled our findings into an emergency report for Council Command. The document contained sensor recordings, tactical analyses, and cultural assessments that painted a radically different picture than the initial briefing. I structured it with clear urgency markers, prioritizing the martial capabilities data over the agricultural observations. The transmission included biometric readings from the nightclub incident and training facility documentation that showed systematic combat education. Commander Vorth Prime insisted on following uplift protocols despite our evidence. He stood before the main display screen, his posture rigid with bureaucratic certainty. He cited Regulation 722 regarding technological assistance to developing species. His argument focused on the humanitarian benefits of sharing medical and energy technologies. He dismissed our combat footage as cultural anomalies rather than strategic patterns. His faith in Council procedures overrode observable reality. The Council viewed humans as technological infants needing guidance. Their response transmission showed complete disregard for our assessment. They referenced the original agricultural data and primitive communication attempts. Their analysis focused on human technological deficiencies rather than organic capabilities. They emphasized the moral imperative of uplifting less advanced species. Their perspective remained locked in bureaucratic categorization rather than situational awareness. They planned immediate contact and technological transfer. The orders came through with priority encryption. The timeline showed first contact within 48 hours, followed by gradual technology sharing over 6 months. The schedule included FTL drive specifications, energy weapon designs, and defensive shield technology. The protocols assumed grateful acceptance rather than strategic assessment by the recipients. Gorth 7 argued this would create an unstoppable galactic power. His tactical projections showed human expansion patterns based on historical terrestrial behavior. He calculated they could achieve military parity with Council forces within 5 years. His models accounted for their industrial capacity and population mobilization rates. The projections showed galactic instability within a decade of first contact. Santa warned their diplomacy would operate from newfound strength. She analyzed their historical treaty patterns and negotiation tactics. Her assessment showed they would use technological advantages to secure favorable terms in all agreements. Their concept of diplomacy involved demonstrated capability rather than mutual benefit. Technological transfer would fundamentally alter galactic power dynamics in their favor. Jax 2 calculated they could reverse engineer FTL travel within years. His engineering analysis showed their capacity for rapid technological adaptation. He cited their history of copying and improving captured technology during conflicts. The jump drive specifications would give them interstellar capability far beyond Council projections. His models showed independent ship construction within 36 months of receiving plans. I documented how their societal structure favored rapid industrialization. Their manufacturing base could convert to military production with minimal retooling. Their workforce maintained relevant skills through constant training exercises. Their infrastructure supported massive mobilization efforts. Their education system produced engineers and technicians alongside soldiers. Giving humans starships would be catastrophic for galactic stability. The combination of organic combat training and technological advancement created unprecedented risk. Their historical patterns showed expansionist tendencies when presented with new capabilities. Their cultural normalization of violence would translate directly to interstellar conflict. We pleaded for reconsideration of contact protocols. Our emergency request highlighted the need for gradual assessment, rather than immediate technology transfer. We suggested covert observation for 5 additional years before making contact. We proposed modified protocols that accounted for their martial capabilities. Our recommendations focused on containment, rather than acceleration of their development. The response from Council Command arrived within hours. They dismissed our concerns as observational bias and cultural misunderstanding. They reaffirmed the uplift timeline and ordered full compliance with contact procedures. The decision was final. The protocols were activated and we were instructed to prepare for first contact operations. The machinery of galactic diplomacy continued moving forward, completely unaware it was approaching a species that would redefine the meaning of power. Council Command dismissed our concerns as xenophobic exaggeration. The official response arrived within hours of our emergency transmission. They cited protocols for technological uplift of developing species as their justification. The regulations specifically prohibited withholding advanced technology from pre-FTL civilizations based on cultural differences. Their assessment concluded we had developed primitive sympathy, a documented phenomenon where observers become overly attached to studied species. Commander Vorth Prime declared Earth perfect for rapid development. He stood before the main display screen with renewed enthusiasm. He praised human industrial capacity and population density as ideal for technological assimilation. His analysis focused entirely on their potential for economic productivity. He completely ignored our documentation of martial training and combat readiness. His perspective remained locked in bureaucratic categorization rather than tactical reality. We received orders to establish formal contact immediately. The transmission carried priority encryption that overrode all previous directives. The timeline showed first contact operations beginning within 48 hours. The schedule included public appearance protocols and ceremonial procedures. The instructions assumed human awe and gratitude rather than strategic assessment. The documents contained no contingency plans for hostile reception. The Times' infinite curiosity was to approach New York City directly. Navigation received specific coordinates over the humans' largest population center. The approach vector would maximize visibility from the surface. The plan called for hovering at low altitude above their financial district. The strategy aimed to demonstrate peaceful intent through visible presence. The protocol completely ignored the tactical vulnerability of such positioning. Gorth 7 prepared defensive measures despite regulations. His hands moved across tactical controls with quiet determination. He brought shield systems to standby status and powered targeting arrays. He calibrated non-lethal deterrence for potential crowd control scenarios. His actions violated 12 separate council regulations regarding first contact procedures. His threat assessment overrode bureaucratic compliance. Santa developed contingency protocols for hostile first contact. She programmed emergency translation matrices for combat terminology. She prepared diplomatic packages for surrender negotiations. Her systems contained templates for prisoner of war protocols in terms of ceasefire. She included medical triage procedures for mass casualty events. Her preparations assumed the worst despite official optimism. Jax 2 plotted escape vectors should humans demonstrate space capability. His navigation calculations included emergency jump coordinates. He identified secondary rally points beyond human sensor range. His projections accounted for potential pursuit scenarios and interception patterns. He prepared 3 separate evacuation protocols for the crew. His planning acknowledged the possibility that humans might already possess hidden capabilities. We were ordered to gift starships to a species of natural warriors. The technology transfer package included FTL drive specifications and energy weapon designs. The Council intended to provide blueprints for defensive shields and communication arrays. The schedule called for gradual technology sharing over 6 months. The protocols assumed human technological dependency rather than strategic adaptation. We prepared for what might be the galaxy's greatest mistake. The crew moved through final preparations with grim efficiency. Systems checks were performed with extra diligence. Equipment was secured for potential combat maneuvers. Communication channels were tested for emergency protocols. We understood the Council's decision was irreversible. We could only prepare for the consequences of giving advanced technology to a species that had perfected violence as an art form. The clock counted down toward first contact with a tension that filled the ship like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Our final approach to New York City revealed the scale of our error. The ship descended through the atmosphere with the quiet hum of anti-grav systems, the sky shifting from black to blue as we dropped below the cloud layer. The initial sensor readings should have been impossible for a primitive species. The data streams showed millions of humans concentrated in dense urban patterns that defied our understanding of their technological level. The population density alone suggested organizational capabilities we hadn't anticipated. The sensors detected patterns of organization suggesting military discipline. The movement of ground vehicles followed precise routes with minimal congestion. Pedestrian flow showed regulated patterns through designated corridors. Even the air traffic moved in coordinated lanes with strict altitude separation. The efficiency matched military base operations rather than civilian infrastructure. Every movement appeared calculated and coordinated across the entire urban area. Transportation networks moved people with efficiency seen only in military bases. The subway systems operated with timed precision that maximized passenger throughput. Bus routes followed schedules that accounted for variable traffic conditions. Traffic lights synchronized to create optimal flow patterns. The mathematical coordination suggested centralized control systems far beyond what should have been possible with their technology level. This was logistical planning of the highest order. Communication networks showed command-level encryption patterns. Our interception systems detected secure channels operating throughout the city. The encryption protocols matched those used by Galactic Special Operations units. The patterns indicated hierarchical command structures with redundant communication pathways. The sophistication exceeded standard civilian requirements by several generations. This wasn't just advanced, it was militarily optimized. Gorth 7 identified what appeared to be concealed defense installations. His tactical scans revealed hardened structures beneath apparent civilian buildings, underground facilities with reinforced construction, concealed weapon emplacements on rooftop structures, transport tunnels that could serve as emergency troop movement corridors. The city wasn't just populated, it was fortified. Santa noted their architecture provided natural defensive positions. The building designs created interlocking fields of fire across major thoroughfares. Structural elements provided cover and concealment points at regular intervals. Elevated positions controlled sightlines across entire districts. The urban planning incorporated defensive considerations into aesthetic choices. This was environment designed for conflict. JAX 2 detected energy signatures inconsistent with primitive technology. The power readings showed regulated outputs that shouldn't be possible with their apparent energy infrastructure. The distribution patterns indicated advanced grid management systems. The consistency of supply matched military-grade reliability standards. There were power sources operating that didn't appear on any of our schematic maps. Humanity was already organized for conflict on planetary scale. The evidence mounted with each new sensor reading. The population distribution allowed rapid mobilization. The transportation networks enabled force projection. The communication systems supported command coordination. The infrastructure provided defensive advantages. The energy systems ensured operational continuity. We realized we weren't uplifting primitives but arming strategists. The technological transfer would merely enhance existing capabilities. Their society was already structured for warfare. Their population was already trained for conflict. Their infrastructure was already designed for defense. Giving them advanced technology wouldn't create a new power. It would unleash an existing one that had been preparing for this moment through their entire history. The Council's humanitarian mission had become the galaxy's greatest security risk. I reviewed the nightclub footage one final time before activation. The recording showed the woman moving through the chaos with impossible grace. Her strikes flowed like water around stone, each movement serving multiple purposes. Defense became offense, evasion became positioning, restraint became control. The efficiency was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The woman's movements represented human capability in microcosm. Her precision reflected their entire approach to conflict. No wasted energy, no unnecessary actions, just maximum effect through perfect execution. Her control showed years of systematic training, condensed into instinctual response. Her efficiency demonstrated optimization beyond anything our engineers could achieve with technology. She was one human in one nightclub, but she represented 8 billion potential combatants. Her precision, control, and efficiency reflected their entire species. The children in dojos learning joint manipulation. The soldiers training in urban combat facilities. The civilians maintaining combat readiness through daily exercise. They all moved with that same economy of motion, that same focus on effectiveness over appearance. Their society had perfected personal capability while appearing technologically primitive. The Galactic Council saw technological backwardness as weakness. They assessed humanity through the lens of energy weapons and force fields. They measured advancement by computational power and transportation speed. They completely missed the organic advancement happening beneath the surface. They saw simple tools and assumed simple capabilities. The assessment was perhaps the greatest intelligence failure in Council history. We understood it concealed unparalleled martial advancement. Their technology wasn't primitive, it was optimized for their needs. Simple weapons that could be mass-produced and easily maintained. Transportation systems that supported rapid mobilization. Communication networks that enabled command coordination. Everything served their central focus: personal and collective combat effectiveness. Gorth 7 calculated human combat effectiveness per capita exceeded most species. His analysis accounted for training levels, physiological capabilities, and tactical understanding. The numbers showed even their civilians could outperform professional soldiers from dozens of Council worlds. Their entire population represented a latent military force of unprecedented scale and capability. The projections were staggering. Santa noted their diplomacy would operate from a position of inherent strength. She analyzed their historical treaty patterns and negotiation tactics. Their concept of peaceful relations involved demonstrated capacity for violence. They would approach galactic diplomacy with the same mindset they approached everything. Strength ensures peace, weakness invites conflict. Technology transfer would merely enhance their negotiating position. Jax 2 confirmed FTL travel would make them immediate galactic powers. His engineering assessment showed they could reverse engineer the technology within years. Their industrial capacity could produce ships faster than any Council species. Their population could crew them with personnel already trained in combat operations. The balance of power would shift overnight in their favor. Humanity was exactly the species you don't give starships to. They weren't primitive creatures needing guidance. They were strategic predators who had perfected warfare as an art form. Giving them advanced technology wouldn't uplift them, it would arm them. The Council's humanitarian mission had become a catastrophic security risk. We activated first contact protocols with profound dread. The systems hummed to life with ceremonial precision. The communication arrays powered up for broadcast. The translation matrices loaded human languages. The ship began its final descent toward the designated coordinates. Every light on the control panel represented another step toward arming a species that had spent its entire history preparing for this moment. The woman's final words echoed in my memory as we descended. Anyone else? As we descended toward the designated contact coordinates, the ship's external cameras captured a sight that should have been impossible. Millions of humans looked up at our vessel without apparent surprise. There were no mass panics, no chaotic scrambles, no signs of awe or confusion. Their faces showed calm observation, some even pointing with casual gestures as if watching a scheduled air show. This wasn't the reaction of primitives encountering advanced technology for the first time. Their response suggested anticipation rather than shock. The crowds didn't scatter, they organized. Traffic flowed into designated holding patterns. Pedestrians moved to observation areas that seemed pre-designated. Emergency vehicles took positions at strategic intersections without apparent communication. The entire city reacted with the coordination of a military unit executing rehearsed maneuvers. The precision was unsettling in its completeness. Communication channels showed preparation for our arrival. Our interception systems detected encrypted traffic referring to package, delivery, and schedule confirmation. Government frequencies discussed guest reception protocols and diplomatic sequencing. News networks ran prepared segments about extraterrestrial contact as if it were anticipated programming. The linguistic patterns indicated advanced planning rather than emergency response. Gorth 7 detected weapons tracking despite primitive technology claims. His tactical display showed targeting locks from ground-based installations we hadn't identified during initial scans. The systems used radar and optical tracking methods that shouldn't have been possible with their technology level. The targeting wasn't aggressive, just precise monitoring of our position and trajectory. They were watching us as carefully as we were watching them. Santa identified diplomatic teams moving with precision to meeting points. Her surveillance tracked black vehicles with official markings converging on our landing coordinates. The motorcades moved with escort vehicles and cleared routes. The personnel carried communication equipment that matched advanced design specifications. Their movements suggested they'd rehearsed this scenario multiple times. They weren't reacting, they were performing. Jax too noted their space agencies had predicted our arrival vector. His analysis of their astronomical tracking data showed they'd calculated our approach pattern days earlier. Their orbital telescopes had been tracking our ship since we entered the solar system. Their scientific communities had published papers predicting first contact timelines. They weren't surprised by our appearance, they'd been expecting us. I remembered the woman's question. Anyone else? The calm challenge she'd issued after disabling 11 humans without breaking sweat. The way she'd positioned herself for optimal engagement. The efficiency of her violence. The lack of emotional reaction. She hadn't been exceptional, she'd been typical. She represented the normalization of capability we were seeing across the entire species. 8 billion humans were ready to become galactic stakeholders. The evidence was undeniable in the organized response below us. Their society had been preparing for this moment through systematic training and strategic planning. They approached first contact not as awestruck primitives, but as calculated negotiators. Their technological simplicity concealed this profound readiness for expansion. The universe would learn why that was both marvelous and terrifying. The same efficiency that created their precise response patterns would translate to interstellar operations. The same discipline that produced their martial prowess would drive their technological advancement. The same coordination that organized their cities would manage their galactic expansion. We were about to give starships to the most prepared species we'd ever encountered. The woman's question echoed in the silent bridge. They were ready for anyone, everyone, whatever came next. The galaxy assumed technological advancement meant civilization evolved beyond violence. Humanity proved that assumption dangerously wrong. They maintained conflict readiness through generations of systematic training and cultural normalization of combat skills. Their apparent technological simplicity concealed the most sophisticated martial culture we'd ever documented. Every aspect of their society optimized for rapid mobilization and maximum combat effectiveness. This foundation could reshape galactic power structures within a single generation of receiving advanced technology. Remember this assessment when you encounter so-called primitive species. Sometimes what appears to be backwardness is actually strategic camouflage developed through millennia of conflict adaptation.